In 2020, a fan drove 3 hours to deliver a much-needed dose of insulin to rapper Boozy Badass. She refused to accept any compensation other than a photo with him. On her way home, she stopped at a gas station, bought a scratch-off ticket, and won 10 grand. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times throughout his life. After his death, his grave was also struck. In 1977, a Spanish woman decided not to reboard her flight and stayed at the layover location even though this was against the rules. She ended up being the sole survivor of a collision that killed 583 people, the deadliest crash in aviation history. In 1935, a fisherman reeled in a tiger shark in Australia and put it on display at a Sydney aquarium until it vomited a human arm. A shark expert later concluded that the arm had not been bitten off but was cleanly removed with a blade. This resulted in a murder investigation and the eventual arrest of the killers. Violet Jessop was a ship nurse in the early 1900s who couldn't seem to avoid disaster. She was on the Titanic when it sank, the Britannic when it was struck by a torpedo, and the Olympic when it collided with another ship. Violet managed to survive all 3. Exactly 50 years after America was established, on July 4, 1826, President John Adams' last words before passing were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Little did he know, President Jefferson had died just a few hours earlier that same day. This woman adopted an elderly dog because it looked exactly like her dog that ran away when she was a child. A microchip scan ended up confirming that it was her old dog. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a suicide bomber planned on blowing up Moscow's Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed miserably when the phone received a spam text wishing her a happy new year. This caused the bomb to detonate while she was still at the safe house, and she was the only person who died. In 2019, 74-year-old Phoenix grandmother Catalin Metro had to be airlifted from a hiking trail after tripping and breaking her nose. But within mere seconds of being lifted off the ground, she quickly found herself in a horrific situation. Apparently, wind from the rotor blades hit Metro's body at the perfect angle to send her body spinning, eventually getting ridiculously fast. Metro said she thought she was going to die as it felt like her eyeballs were popping out of her skull while she had no idea what was happening. She did her best to control her breathing and managed to stay conscious for the entire rescue. When the chopper finally landed, Metro's face was completely black from all the blood vessels that burst as she spun. The woman says she spent nearly a month in a rehabilitation facility after suffering numerous injuries and ended up winning $450K in a civil lawsuit just recently. The disaster apparently happened as a result of several failures in the rescue team's compliance with safety standards. A British Marine had a leg tattoo of Liverpool's motto, "You'll never walk alone." But after a major injury in Afghanistan, his leg was amputated, and the surgeon had to cut the tattoo so it now read, "You'll never walk." Author Lois Duncan wrote many popular crime and suspense novels throughout the 70s and 80s, but she essentially stopped writing completely when her own daughter became the victim of an unsolved murder case in 1989. In 1950, a church in Nebraska exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. In 1977, the University of Evansville men's basketball team was involved in a tragic plane crash. The crash killed everyone on the team except for one young man who didn't make the trip due to an injury. But just 2 weeks after the crash, the only surviving player, 18-year-old statistician David Furr, was killed by a drunk driver. During Bill Clinton's sexual affair with Monica Lewinsky, she inhaled his front tail several times while he was talking on the phone with a member of Congress. On one occasion, the president inserted a cigar up Lewinsky's sniz, then put the cigar in his mouth and told her he liked it. During another encounter, Lewinsky was performing on Clinton before his erectoplasm got all over her blue dress. She kept the stained dress as an insurance policy, and it was later used as key evidence against Clinton. During World War I, French prostitutes with severe cases of syphilis charged higher rates than uninfected prostitutes. This was because soldiers infected with syphilis would be removed from the front line. In the 1950s, the KGB tried to blackmail the president of Indonesia by getting him to come to Moscow, where a bunch of women persuaded him to have intercourse with them. When the KGB showed him the footage, the president asked for extra copies, saying the Indonesian people would be proud. Dolly Parton was born dirt poor in a one-bedroom cabin in the mountains of Tennessee. The home had no electricity or running water, so Dolly and her 11 siblings struggled to stay clean. Their father was a sharecropper who couldn't read and struggled to make ends meet for his many children. As the family grew, the older kids took on more responsibilities, and Dolly, being the fourth of 12 children, had to look after her younger siblings, and would often entertain them with her guitar playing and singing before turning her talents into a career. Much of her music is inspired by her tough upbringing, and today she donates millions to help those in need. It's widely believed that Shrek was modeled after Maurice Tillett, aka the world's ugliest man. He was a celebrated pro wrestler in the 1940s who suffered from acromegaly, a condition that results in bone overgrowth and thickening. DreamWorks has declined to comment on whether or not this is true, despite the uncanny resemblance. Here's the Paramount Pictures logo on the day it was originally painted in 1965. DJ scratching was invented in 1975 when Grand Wizard Theodore would play his records too loudly, prompting his mother to constantly enter his room and scold him. This caused Theodore to hold the record still, accidentally moving it back and forth and liking the sound it made. 31-year-old One Direction member Liam Payne has died after falling from the third floor of his balcony at an Argentinian hotel. In a statement, local authorities say they had responded to reports of an aggressive man who could be under the effects of drugs and alcohol. Upon arriving, they found Payne's lifeless body on the ground where the hotel manager had told them he heard a loud thud. The musician had been very open about his persistent struggles with addiction and depression in the past, but the details surrounding his death remain unclear at this time. In case you haven't been following along, here's what we know so far about the disturbing case against P. Diddy. Following his arrest, Sean P. Diddy Combs was handed some rather damning charges that accused the rapper of running a decades-long operation which included sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, and bribery. The charges were centered around the parties that Diddy would throw called freak-offs, in which he and others would allegedly intimidate victims into performing sick, non-consensual acts on each other. During these parties, Combs allegedly hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, sometimes by their hair, which often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. The rapper allegedly gave his victims a collection of drugs, in part to keep them compliant and obedient. He also utilized the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during these freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued silence of the victims. These freak-offs allegedly occurred regularly for decades, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved commercial prostitutes. When Diddy's homes were raided by federal agents last spring, they seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics, illegal weapons, and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. Diddy's attorneys requested that he be released on a $50 million bond, which was denied after prosecutors warned that Diddy was a serial abuser who still posed a serious flight risk and might intimidate victims if released. Combs pleaded not guilty. Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, was an associate of convicted New York drug lord Frank Lucas. When Diddy was just 2 years old, his father was gunned down in a related gang attack. In 1991, P. Diddy organized an AIDS fundraiser after a charity basketball game. The event was oversold and a stampede occurred that resulted in the deaths of 9 people. He was quickly criticized by the mayor for letting inexperienced people plan the event and selling way too many tickets. A former FBI agent has claimed that Tupac's former boss Suge Knight financed the murder of Biggie Smalls in 1997, but the intended target was actually Biggie's boss P. Diddy, who was in the car in front of Biggie at the time. According to her lawsuit filed last year, when Cassie Ventura hit a rough patch in her relationship with Diddy in 2012, she briefly dated Kid Cudi. Combs was apparently so angry at this that he mentioned he wanted to blow up the rapper's car. The lawsuit reads, around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway. Diddy's former dancer, Adria English, has spilled some serious tea about the notorious rapper, and the details are beyond disturbing. English was a go-go dancer for Diddy and was stationed at certain checkpoints at his freak-off parties. She claims she was used by Diddy to help set people up for blackmail. Here are her most disturbing claims from a recent interview, which get worse as the list goes on. And to be very clear, these are all just allegations that haven't yet been confirmed. Diddy refused to let a young dancer use the bathroom during one of his parties, so she just went number 2 on stage. Guest Denzel Washington watched this happen and stormed out of the party in pure disgust. Diddy once had a threesome with rapper Nelly and an unnamed underage girl. In the leaked photos of Diddy eating fruit off of a woman, she was actually 14 years old. An underage girl Diddy sexually abused had 2 of his children, and he helped deliver the babies at his own residence. At one party, Diddy made J-Lo stick a bottle in the private area of an 11-year-old girl. Diddy's 2 sons, Justin and Christian Combs, ran a train on Justin Bieber while he was tied down and sobbing. A young girl who witnessed this happening is part of the lawsuit against Diddy. The rapper apparently slapped her when she tried to loosen the straps on Bieber. And lastly, English herself says she was on one of the Diddy tapes as an underage girl being sexually abused by a former president. English has hinted that she'll be one of the witnesses to testify against Diddy in his upcoming trial. When Pocahontas was 12 years old, she would entertain white colonists by doing cartwheels without wearing any clothes. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable thanks to so many written accounts. From the 40s to the 70s, many Ivy League colleges, including Yale, Harvard, and Princeton, required all incoming freshmen to have nude photos taken of them. Administrators claimed it was to gauge the rate of diseases like rickets and scoliosis, but many believe the true reason behind them was much creepier. Most of the photos have since been destroyed, but thousands still remain in the Smithsonian's possession. In 1940, Walt Disney hired 11 little people to dress up as Pinocchio and wave to people at the movie's premiere. He left them on a theater balcony with enough food and wine for the day, but there was no way for them to get down. By late afternoon, they had all taken off their thick, sweaty costumes and were naked, drunk, and swearing at innocent parents and their children. In 1983, 22-year-old Michael Anderson Godwin was sentenced to death by electric chair after brutally murdering a young woman in South Carolina. But the electrocution ruling was later overturned, and Godwin was only handed a life sentence. A few years later, he was sitting on his toilet while trying to connect his headphones to his TV when he bit down on the wire and was electrocuted to death. In 2019, a man was using Google Earth to check out his old neighborhood when he happened to stumble upon something spooky. A car containing the remains of a man who'd been missing for 22 years. 40-year-old William Molt was reported missing in 1997 when he failed to return home after leaving a nightclub. Here's a 1989 photo of South African spearfisherman Geerjo van Niekerk showing off his recent bite mark from a great white. He told reporters it was a 1-in-a-million freak accident. While diving near Cape Town just 2 months afterwards, Geerjo went missing until his shark-bitten leg washed ashore a few days later. The beloved Bob Ross, who hosted The Joy of Painting in the 70s and 80s, was originally a master drill sergeant in the U.S. Air Force who screamed at men for a living. He was a strict, fearsome leader who became known as Bust 'em Up Bobby for his toughness towards subordinates. But Bob later said he didn't actually enjoy this aspect of his job, and promised that if he ever left the military, he would never shout again. This helped him develop the calm and gentle demeanor he became famous for on his painting show. After winning Academy Awards for Best Picture and Director for the movie Gandhi in 1982, Richard Attenborough openly claimed that Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial should have won instead. Spielberg ended up casting him as John Hammond in Jurassic Park to thank him. Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada by a Greek immigrant who was inspired by Chinese food to put a South American ingredient on an Italian dish. Hawaiian pizza then went on to become the most popular pizza in Australia. In 2013, ABC News reporter Amy Rohrbach had a mammogram taken live on TV to promote breast cancer awareness. It just so happened that she did have cancer, and the procedure likely saved her life. After watching a documentary about an apartment that was once used as a torture chamber, Christina McGaw realized she was actually living in the same apartment it happened in. Famous Austrian composer and painter Arnold Schoenberg had extreme triskaidekaphobia, a fear of the number 13. He ended up dying on Friday the 13th at the age of 76. 7 plus 6 equals 13. In the history of Major League Baseball, there have only been 3 players with the first name Aurelio. Amazingly but tragically, they all died in separate car accidents. In Oregon 1970, a dead sperm whale was blown up with dynamite and chunks of its flesh were launched up to 700 feet away. One of the pieces destroyed a brand new car that was purchased during a promotion called Get a Whale of a Deal. Keanu was set up for a bumpy ride from the start, as his drug addict father bailed on his family when Reeves was just 3 years old. leaving his mom to jump from marriage to marriage while giving young Keanu zero sense of stability. Keanu had his first taste of tragedy when his best friend River Phoenix died of a drug overdose in 1993. The two had co-starred in My Private Idaho just 2 years prior and had become very close with one another on and off set. A few years later, when the actor was filming for The Matrix, his daughter was stillborn at 8 months. The tragedy caused he and his girlfriend to briefly break up just before she was killed in a car crash. Since then, he's donated most of his earnings from movies to charities and has avoided having kids. Keanu's sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and prepared all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it. I just let the foundation do what it does." This is the clearest and most recent photo ever taken on the surface of Venus. It was taken by a Soviet space probe in 1982, just before it was destroyed by the dense 900-degree atmosphere on the planet. This incredible photograph of Freddie Mercury performing on stage was taken by a 16-year-old girl who snuck her camera into a Queen concert in 1978. Here's an aerial photograph showing an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon that was ready to go to battle against a helicopter. Someone accidentally deleted important photos from their camera, so an image recovery software brought them all back, including this test shot taken where the camera was assembled somewhere in China. This incredible award-winning photograph from 2017 left scientists from all over the world completely astonished. At the very center of the image is a single atom that was suspended in motion by electric fields. What makes this photo so amazing is that it was captured by just an ordinary camera. After filming Psycho, actress Janet Leigh was so terrified of showers that she only took baths for 35 straight years. On the extremely rare occasion that she did take a shower, she made sure that every door in the house was locked and left the shower curtain open. While filming for Resident Evil 5, there was an accident on set that left 16 people injured. Their zombie costumes were so gory that first responders on the scene had a very difficult time assessing the injuries. The woman who voiced the demon Pazuzu in the original Exorcist had a son who murdered his whole family before turning the gun on himself. He did all of this while wearing a Freddy Krueger mask. Speaking of The Exorcist, one of the actors in the film went on to become an actual serial killer. Paul Bateson, who plays a nurse in the film, eventually confessed to the killing and dismembering of 6 gay men throughout the 1970s. But he was released on parole in 2004 after serving only 5 years in prison. During a trip to Africa in 1896, American taxidermist Carl Akeley survived a leopard attack by ramming his hand down the cat's throat and choking it to death. Today, Carl is known as the father of modern taxidermy for his innovative techniques, and is also remembered for inventing the nature dioramas that are popular at museums. A Russian kitchen worker named Zinaida Portnova is known for killing more than 100 Nazis by poisoning their food when she was only 16. While being interrogated by the Gestapo, she disarmed the Nazi detective and shot him in the head. She then murdered 2 more Nazis with the same gun before being killed while attempting to escape. Nicknamed Black Death, Henry Johnson was a member of the Harlem Hellfighters who single-handedly stopped a German ambush in World War I. Despite being stabbed, shot, and hit with a grenade, the 5'4" soldier injured or killed 24 German enemies without a working gun. He was the first American soldier to win a Croix de Guerre, France's highest honor for bravery. Super freak singer Rick James once had such a bad hangover that he was unable to attend a small party thrown by his friends Jay Sebring and Sharon Tate. But the hangover ended up saving his life, since that night, all 5 occupants of the home would end up being murdered by the Manson family. In 1999, Richard Anthony Jones was convicted of a felony even though he had a strong alibi. He spent 17 years in prison until police found and arrested his doppelganger who was living in the same town with the same first name. In 1995, a man named Terry Cottle turned the gun on himself. Terry's heart was then donated to Sonny Graham, who ended up marrying his donor's widow. Soon enough, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's traits. He started liking things that he'd never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. A few years later, Sonny would end up dying in the exact same way as his donor, by turning the gun on himself. Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set. Nobody offered to help him. This is because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. Hungarian man Adam Rayner was barely 4 feet tall for the first half of his life due to dwarfism. But during his 20s, a pituitary tumor caused a dramatic growth spurt, and by age 33, he was 7'2". He's the only person in recorded history to have been both a dwarf and a giant. Alexander I of Yugoslavia refused to make a public appearance on a Tuesday after 3 of his close family members died on a Tuesday. After finally being forced to appear on a Tuesday, he was promptly assassinated. In 1923, 22-year-old jockey Frank Hayes suffered a heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race. But his body remained on the saddle throughout the race as his horse Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line first. It was the first time Hayes had ever won a race. And the last. Charles II of Spain was the product of 200 years of incest that intended to strengthen the family line. He was breastfed until the age of 4 and never fully learned how to walk. Before reaching the age of 6, Charles miraculously survived a series of diseases, including chickenpox, measles, rubella, and smallpox. As an adult, he was completely illiterate and could barely chew or speak due to his deformed jaw and enlarged tongue. He was so ugly and disfigured that his own wife was terrified of him. Renowned historians Will and Ariel Durant vividly described him as short, lame, epileptic, senile, and completely bald before 35, always on the verge of death but completely baffling Christendom by continuing to live. His autopsy report revealed disturbing findings, stating that his heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines gangrenous and rotten. He had a single testicle black as coal, and his head was full of water. English mother Mary Ann Bevan developed a hormonal condition called acromegaly that completely distorted her face, resulting in her losing her job as a nurse due to her ugliness. After the passing of her husband, Mary was left with no choice but to join the circus so that she could still support her 4 kids. She was nicknamed the ugliest woman on earth and endured daily ridicule for the last 13 years of her life just so she could continue to feed her family. American man Bob Fletcher took care of the farms of 3 Japanese-American families while they were interned during World War II. Despite being shot at for supporting them, Bob kept all their farms running and paid their bills, ensuring that the innocent families didn't lose everything. During the Parkland shooting in 2018, a 15-year-old student named Anthony Borges was shot 5 times while barricading the door to his classroom. He successfully stopped the shooter from entering, saving all 20 of his classmates, and eventually went on to make a full recovery. In 1954, Ann Hodges was hit with a softball-sized meteorite while taking a nap in her Alabama home. She remains the only known human to ever be hit by a meteorite. Jeremy Moody was a guest at a party for lifeguards who were celebrating going an entire season without anyone drowning. But at the end of the party, with over 100 lifeguards present, Jeremy's body was found at the bottom of the pool. In 1996, a man's body floated up to a boat in the seas of the UK. There was no identification on the body except for a 25-year-old Rolex Oyster on his wrist. Thanks to Rolex maintaining such meticulous service records, they were able to identify the man and ultimately his killer. In the 1980s, a family owned a ceramic factory in California called Oscar Ceramics. But in 1987, the factory was shut down when it was revealed to be an illegal crematorium. This only happened when a passerby who happened to be a Holocaust survivor recognized the smell of burning bodies from his time at Auschwitz. A few years after singing the hit song Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Diana Ross lost her ex-husband in a tragic mountain climbing accident. In 1902, the Mount Pelee eruption killed all 30,000 people in a village except for a prisoner who was on death row. He was locked up deep underground in solitary confinement, which served as the perfect shelter from the blast. In 2015, a man swimming near Huntington Beach, California was suddenly struck in the back by a great white. After making it ashore and going to the hospital, doctors assured him that he'd be fine. Upon seeing his x-rays, they realized he had a cancerous tumor that they were just barely able to remove in time. In Bermuda, 1974, 17-year-old Erskine Eben was struck and killed by a taxi driver while riding his moped. Almost exactly a year later, his twin brother Neville was riding that same moped when he was struck and killed by the same taxi driver, carrying the same passenger on the same street.